Well, hmm. I should be wearing something that's Blues Brothers esque for this review, but I think that would be a little silly because I'm not gonna get in full costume for a video that's probably gonna be less than 15 minutes long and not take that long for me to post on YouTube. So, since this movie hit its 40th anniversary recently, I only thought it was fair to actually talk about it because I've seen the movie dozens of times. I love the story, love the music, and the cool thing about this movie is that it actually started from an old SNL skit in the early 70s, which of course featured Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi as Jake and Elwood Blues. And what kind of started off as a bit of a silly skit for a comedy skit show, it actually became a legitimate band. Not that long after the band was formed, they would release their own album full of covers of many blues classics from the 50s and the 60s. And because of the success of the skit and the album, they decided to make a movie out of it. And Dan Aykroyd actually pitched a script that was like 320 pages long, and John Landis, who had just come off of Animal House not that long before he read the script, he actually had to cut it down to something that was actually more feasible and more, easier to actually commit to a film. Because I think Aykroyd's main intention was to make it this big, grand epic, and Landis took one look at the script and he was like, Dan, I love your enthusiasm, but there's no way we can fit all this into a movie, you know? So after tweaking the script for 2 weeks, they proceeded to film the movie. And honestly, I like the movie, but there's not a whole lot to say about it, really. So I feel like most of this video is going to be me bringing up stuff around the periphery or, stuff in the background, stuff that happened during filming, etc. But I do have quite a bit to say about this film. The plot, it's a very basic plot. And the one thing I actually really think this movie does well is that it takes a simple premise about redemption and then makes this over the top comedy that, I mean, the movie is still pretty long. It's about 2 hours and 13 minutes. So that's a pretty long time for a musical, really. So the plot is Joliet Jake, played by John Belushi, has recently been released from prison, and he and his brother Elwood realize from one of the nuns that they grew up with that the orphanage that they were raised in is being shut down because the church has to pay this new tax that's $5,000. So the Blues Brothers, trying to find a way to raise the money within 11 days, decide to reform their R&B group, coincidentally called the Blues Brothers. So the movie is them basically trying to get their band back together and trying to get a concert going to raise the necessary funds to save their orphanage or childhood home from being defunct. And again, it is kind of a basic story about redemption, but much like any good road trip, it's not about getting to your destination, it's about the trip that you go on to get there. And I will say this, the chemistry between Aykroyd and Belushi, it is really good. You can definitely tell that these are guys that work well with each other. Jake really just needs Elwood to help him escape from any trouble. Because Jake is usually the one that comes up with the plan, and he just kind of needs Elwood there to help back him up in either getting away with the scheme or getting him the hell out of there. And again, I mean, the performances are good, but again, the movie's not really asking for Oscar bait speeches, so it's not really that complex. And as far as the other characters in the movie, the bandmates that the Blues Brothers get, their acting is not as good as it could be, but it was passable. There actually are a few notable guest appearances from James Brown, Aretha Franklin, God rest her soul, Ray Charles, Cab Calloway, and John Lee Hooker. And those five guest stars, their performances are amazing. The music in this movie is amazing. And I also like how four of the guest stars. John Lee Hooker is just he doesn't really get to act. He's just performing a song in the background. But Aretha Franklin and the other blues musicians that have cameos, even though they're mainly known as musicians, they're really good at delivering their performances. And the singing, what I found really funny about the movie is that I read that the professional musicians outside of the main band, they had a hard time getting used to lip syncing because they were so used to either singing in a recording booth or singing music live. So they kind of found it a little weird that they had to lip sync. And with James Brown, he basically sang karaoke with his number. And Aretha Franklin, her shots in the Think scene was basically the best shots of her lip syncing to the song just spliced together for that scene. So I thought that was there was a lot of hard work that went into this movie. Um, I also like the environment that most of the film takes place in because it is kind of like a gritty heartland rock, bluesy soul kind of town that you see in the kind of songs that these guys are singing and playing along with. The opening scene where they play "She Caught the Katy," originally done by Taj Mahal, that was actually that was a perfect scene and just a perfect setup for the film. And this film not only is a musical, it's also a really hilarious comedy. Most of the jokes are hilarious. Like for example, the scene where Jake and Elwood visits the nun who they nicknamed the Penguin, and they cuss her out in the whole scene after she starts beating them up for swearing. That's actually really funny, and it's also kind of weird that the Catholic Church considers this good Christian viewing, considering the fact that they're kind of presented in a weird supernatural way, and they're kind of mocked at times. Like again, I mentioned the scene where the nun is smacking Elwood and Jacob a ruler. Then she just pulls out a horsewhip and starts smacking him with it. I mean, it's funny. I remember when I first saw that scene at 16 years old, I laughed hysterically at that. It was insane. A lot of the jokes are actually, while they're really funny, there is one joke that I do kind of feel would not work well, to be honest. It's during a scene where where the Blues Brothers are trying to get one of their bandmates back, and this guy, Mr. Fabulous, who's the trumpet player, is working in this upscale restaurant. And not only do the Blues Brothers act rude, but they also ask one of the patrons how much can they get for their women. You know, it's Jake that's like, he taps the guy on his shoulder. He's like, "How much for your little girl? How much for the women?" He's like, "I want to buy your women, little girl, your daughters. Sell them to me. Sell me your children. You, how much for your wife?" It's just like prostitution jokes. Yay! Oh, Christ. Okay, I'm really happy that this channel is meant for people above 13. Otherwise, this video would probably get me in trouble. Dear God, I hope this isn't. I might regret making this joke, but yeah, that's probably the one joke in the movie that probably hasn't aged well. The scene with the Illinois Nazis, considering what's going on in this country now, it's kind of alarmingly relevant. So there's some interesting stuff to talk about with this movie. Um, I think the only real criticism I can give the movie, aside from a joke that I personally find funny, but I could see it aging poorly now, I do kind of have an issue with one of the scenes where the Blues Brothers cheat their way into a country gig, and the owner and the head bartender don't realize that they're not the good old boys. It's like, I mean, I get the joke is that rednecks are stupid, but these guys, I mean, these you really thought these guys were a country group with the shades, the hat, the suit and tie, the electric guitars and stuff. That wasn't a turnoff. That wasn't a red flag for you. All in all, that's really my one complaint about the movie. But the ending, I like how exaggerated this movie is. From the over the top car chases, the cartoon physics of the movie, the ending where almost every cop in the world is trying to catch these guys with everyone in the army and the National Guard. It is wonderfully exaggerated, this movie. There really isn't a whole lot to go into because again, most of the interesting stuff about the movie is the stuff that happened behind the scenes and during the making of. Because the film is kind of a straightforward story, but it is a lot of fun to watch. And it's actually kind of hard to watch now because we got John Belushi's dead, Carrie Fisher died a few years ago, and John Candy's been dead pretty much about the amount of time I've been alive. You know, so it is kind of hard to watch this movie knowing that some of these amazing actors are no longer with us. Um, I hope I didn't sound like I was rambling too much in this, but the truth of the matter is there wasn't a whole lot for me to talk about or expand on, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare for this review, so I'm doing my best. Don't crucify me, please. Um, but yeah, I really do think that I would say that if you haven't seen this movie before, I think you'll probably be very happy with the result. Um, I do feel like that my criticisms of the movie were probably nitpicks to say the least. Between the rednecks being stupid, the bandmates not being great actors, and well, actually, another thing I can say is that I think another criticism I have about the movie is that most of the music in this film doesn't really pertain to the storyline. I mean, the song Aretha Franklin performs, yeah, it does fit with the story and moves it along, but everything else is kind of a weird side trip. But aside from all those mistakes, the movie is probably one of the best cases of having a simplistic plot but having a lot of fun with it. So that's really all I have to say about the movie. And next time I'll definitely put more homework in. Um, I've been kind of busy this week, so I didn't really have a whole lot of time to put this together. Anyway, so my next song will be on Monday, and I'm not sure what I'm going to review next week, but we'll find that out in good time. Take care.